It's Mo. It is August 14th, and I have not done my mid-year book tag yet. So this is often called the mid-year book freak out tag. I just call it the mid-year tag because, like, I don't know, why are you freaking out? Are you freaking out because you're happy? Are you freaking out because you're sad? Are you freaking out because you're behind or you're ahead? I'm not behind or ahead because I have no goals, really. I did set a number goal this year for my amount of reading, which we will talk about in one moment. But my point is that I'm not freaking out. I'm just checking in the mid-year. And I'm not even checking in the mid-year because we're already in August. I have had plans to do this tag since the end of June. I always like to do my check-in tags, my like quarter, mid, end of year check-in tags at the quarter. So I like to do the mid-year tag after June so I can talk about a full 6 months of reading, and that is what we're going to talk about today. This tag was created by two creators, which I will list down below, who I don't think make videos anymore, but you can see a wide range of people doing this video, and some people do it earlier in the year, some people do it like at the end of May or the beginning of June, some people do it later in the year. I'm still seeing a lot of them come through my feed, so if you like tags like this, definitely search it on YouTube, and then you'll be able to see a lot more creators mid-year tag, whether they're freaking out or not. For my tag, like I said, I have been collecting books. I've had a list of books and a list of the questions since the end of June, and I've been meaning to make this tag, but for some reason, I don't know, I've just been hesitant to do it. I haven't wanted to sit down and do it, or I've wanted to sit down and do it and didn't have time, or I got all ready to do it and then something came up and I wasn't able to do it. So we're doing it now. And like I said, this is going to be the first 6 months of my reading. Another thing about this tag is that people do add in questions, and my questions are based on the originals, but they have some add-ins from Books and Lala and from times that I've done this tag in the past. So I might have a few more, less different questions than you will see in other people's tag. My first question is, how many books have you read so far in 2025? And like I said, we're going till the end of June. So in the end of June, I had read 109 books. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I did set a reading goal at 114 books, I believe, for 2025. I always set a reading goal because I do like to see the counter go up or not go up, depending on Goodreads or Storygraph. I use both Goodreads and Storygraph. I'm leaning towards maybe getting rid of Goodreads and just using Storygraph, and I'm even considering maybe doing like a free trial of the paid Storygraph to see if that's something that I would like to do in the future, because really on Goodreads I just use it as my want to read list. So any book that I ever see that I'm interested in, I put on my want to read list, and that is like my very tenuous TBR of like books that I would like to read. And then when I actually acquire that book, it comes off of my Goodreads list and it goes on to my actual TBR spreadsheet. I don't do that on Storygraph, so really Goodreads, that's the only thing I use it for, and then sometimes a little bit for social media too. Some of my friends like Suzanne are still on Goodreads. You know, sometimes we'll comment on books that each other are reading, so I do like that aspect as well. Other than that, it's not good for very many things. You know, the only other thing that it kind of is good for is that it has a lot more books than Storygraph still. I can still find almost any book on Goodreads, and sometimes I have to add the books myself for Storygraph. My goal was 114 books, but I have not really been tracking my reading. I mean, I do add in my books to both Goodreads and Storygraph always as I read them, but I wasn't caring if I met the goal or didn't meet the goal. Obviously, if I was at 109 books at the end of June, I have now met the goal, which is true. The next question for the mid-year tag is the best book that you've read so far, and the best book that I read so far was The Color Purple by Alice Walker. I put off reading this book for a really long time because I was nervous that it would be too heavy, that it would not live up to the hype, that I wouldn't like it. And something I didn't realize about this book before I went into it was that it's an epistolary novel, so like I should have known that I was gonna like it. I love an epistolary novel. That should have led me to read this sooner. It being about queer trauma, but also about queer joy should have led me to read this sooner, and I didn't really realize that was true. Not that this does not have hard topics. There is child rape on the very first page, like literally the first page of the novel. There's also a lot of queer joy in this book. So if you have not read this classic, this queer classic, if you are intimidated by it, I would definitely highly suggest checking it out. I loved it. The next question on the mid-year tag is best sequel that you've read so far. I did not read a lot of sequels in the beginning of the year. I did reread Binti, the first in the series, and then I also read the sequel, Home, Binti Home by Nnedi Okorafor. I really liked Binti when I first read it, but I found it maybe a little confusing. It was some of the first Afrofuturism I had read, and it is very short, but there is a lot of world building and character development in such a short book. Binti Home is a little bit longer and gets even more into world building and character development, but I really like them together. I don't think you could read Binti Home, the second in the series, as a standalone. I think you really need to read it all together, and I'm excited to read the last in the series at some point, then maybe do a reread of all three, like back to back. Another good series was Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevens. When I first read Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, I didn't think I was going to like it. I wasn't sure if I was going to like the direct-to-reader, tongue-in-cheek approach. I wasn't sure if I was going to like the glib humor, but I ended up really liking that one, and I think Everyone on This Train is a Suspect does a good job of being very, very similar in a lot of ways, but also being different enough and having a different enough new story that you also want to follow it. I also think that Ernest Cunningham, our main character in these books, is annoying and not a wholly good person, but a fun character to follow. So I do enjoy reading his further adventures, and I plan on reading the next in the series, which is a short Christmas special novella. Hopefully Benjamin Stevenson will be writing more of these books as well. I think you have to read these physically because there's a lot of lists and different literary devices and wink wink nod nod kind of things that I'm sure you can get in the audiobook but aren't as visually stimulating, obviously, if you're not visually looking at it. I think these are great, fun, fast, silly mysteries to read physically. The next question, your favorite reread. I did reread Every Heart a Doorway, which I did enjoy. When I initially read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, I didn't love it. I mean, I liked it a lot, but I didn't love it. I think that I loved the series. I don't necessarily love the books individually all the time. Some of the books I like, some of the books I love, but the series as a whole I love, so that was a good reread. I also reread The Devil in the Dark Water, which I really enjoyed my reread of that. That was another one that when I first read it, I wasn't so sure about it. I ended up thinking about it a lot, and I was told to read The Tainted Cup by my friend, and the premise of The Tainted Cup reminded me of The Devil in the Dark Water, so I read The Devil in the Dark Water again, and I really loved that one by Stuart Turton. I did reread a couple of short stories back to back. I read it and then I almost immediately reread it this year because I'm trying to get through the short stories that I want to read, and sometimes reading those on audio is a little loose for me, I guess is a way you could put it. I read them fast and while I'm doing other things, so sometimes I'm not 100% sure that I grasp everything that's going on. Over the last 3 years, I've reread the Claire DeWitt series by Sarah Gran, and I really loved my reread of that. I reread number 2 and number 3, so Claire DeWitt and the Bohemian Highway and Claire DeWitt and the Infinite Blacktop, and I really liked my reread of those. I had reread the first in the series a while ago, so it was really nice to be back in that universe and kind of finish that universe up fairly quickly. And then Sarah Gran, well, okay, that's a question for later, but Sarah Gran is putting out another in the series. Well, it's a collection of short stories that has Claire DeWitt stories in it, so I'm super excited about that. That'll come up again later. I reread Sula by Toni Morrison because I'm reading her work in publication order, so I started with The Bluest Eye and then moved back to Sula, and I really liked my reread of that. I don't think it was as powerful the second time that I read it, but I did enjoy reading it. And those were pretty much all the rereads I did. So I think if I had to pick a favorite, I would say it was the Claire DeWitt series. So Claire DeWitt and the Bohemian Highway and Claire DeWitt and The Infinite Blacktop, because I love Claire DeWitt so much, and I feel like those are books that are basically like written for me. The next question is most read genre. Usually every year my most read genre is mystery, and I have read quite a few mysteries, but I think if I had to guess, it would be like general lit fit. I have read a lot of mysteries, but I've read a lot of other things that fall into lit fic that could be like a little bit mystery as well. No, probably mystery is my most read genre. New release that's currently out that you haven't read yet. I don't follow new releases, but like I just said, Sarah Gran is doing a Claire DeWitt book where it is multiple short stories. I don't know if they're all Claire DeWitt stories. I don't know if that was out yet. I have read a couple of 2025 releases so far this year, some short stories, some longer novels, but I think that that one is one that I was really anticipating. Let's see, let's actually look it up. The other thing that I don't like about Goodreads is there's so many ads. Little Mysteries, 9 miniature puzzles to confuse, enthrall, and delight. Published 2025 in February. So yes, I would like to read that, and that can definitely count as new release I haven't read yet. I wanted to mention, not a new release, but something that I was highly anticipating that I have read, which is Winter in Sakjo by Eliza Shua Disapan. I have been looking for this one for years. I've really wanted to read it, so I'm super glad that I found it. It is about a young woman living in Sakjo, Korea, and kind of her life is at a standstill. This short novel is about whether she's going to move on with her life and move past some of the things that have been stopping her or not. But I really enjoyed it. I'm glad to have found that one. It was a highly anticipated book for me. Not a new release though. The next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And like I said, I really don't know because I don't really follow new releases. I'm sure there are new releases that I would like to read, but I'll just read them whenever I read them. Biggest disappointment. Okay, I have quite a few biggest disappointments. Some of them are like gonna be my worst of the year. Some of them are not going to be my worst of the year. One of my biggest disappointments is My Dog Tulip by J.R. Ackerley. This is an NYRB nonfiction book. I love NYRB books, and I've had this one on my shelf for a while. Even before that, I really wanted to read it because it is J.R. Ackerley's like diary of his dog Tulip, and I thought, wow, that's gonna be so amazing. That's gonna be so incredible. It was written in 1965 and I just thought it was going to be great, but this was like all about dog sex. It was all about dog penises, it was all about dog periods. It was like very disappointing in that it just wasn't what I expected. It wasn't kind of the wholesome, sweet time capsule of this dog so much as it was more about J.R. Ackerley's like obsession with breeding her for her own good. He did truly love his dog, but like just as a read, as a book to read and enjoy, this was not very enjoyable. A disappointment only because I kind of had high hopes for Madonna in a Fur Coat because people talk about this being so groundbreaking and so amazing and so interesting, and it's kind of a story within a story, so I thought I was going to really like it. I did like this book by Sahabatin Ali, but it just wasn't as like amazing as I had heard tell. It was mostly just a story of a young man and his obsession with a young woman. It had some interesting things to say about relationships and about the societal norms placed on the gender normative people, but other than that, it wasn't like as groundbreaking or fascinating as I thought it was going to be. I did like kind of the surrounding story of the story within a story. I thought that part was kind of interesting and the way it was done was interesting. I didn't dislike this book, but it was a little bit disappointing. And then a book that wasn't a disappointment because I didn't really hold out much hopes for it, but it was really bad, like surprisingly bad, was Brooklyn in Love, A Delicious Memoir of Food, Family, and Finding Yourself by Amy Thomas. So this is a woman who's worked in food writing and food blogging, but it's just a really entitled story of like a rich woman getting everything she wants and then kind of complaining about it. It was really, really bad. Vies for some of the worst of the year. The next question is favorite new author. For favorite new author, some people say like, oh, I have to have 3 books by this person to be a favorite author, or I have to give 5 stars. I don't give star ratings. I don't really think of it that way. I think probably a new favorite author could be Louise Erdrich. I read The Sentence, which is the second book that I've read by Louise Erdrich, and I have a lot of her books that I've been collecting. I also read Future Home of the Living God prior to this, prior to 2025. I knew that I loved her work, but I think that The Sentence definitely cemented her as like a favorite author and made me even more excited to get to all the books that I've been collecting of hers. So we could definitely consider that. I think you could also consider Jeff Vandermeer, because I have read 3 Jeff Vandermeers, which I love, well, 4, 3 of which I loved, which was the entire Southern Reach trilogy, but like I wasn't sure. Did I do Biggest Surprise? I didn't. I wasn't sure if I was going to love his writing overall, because I've also read another short story by him, which I thought was okay, but I did really like Born. So I skipped a question. After Biggest Disappointment should have been Biggest Surprise, and I think that that can go to Born, because this one I really struggled with, and then I ended up really, really liking it. I think a big surprise for me was The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Caw and Richard Kadrey, because this is a very high fantasy, urban fantasy, which is not the kind of book that I normally read, but I really enjoyed this one. We could go back to The Color Purple. Was a great surprise for me because I wasn't sure I was going to love this, and I absolutely did. So moving on to newest favorite crush. I don't usually crush on characters that much in books. I don't know why. I just don't think of them that way. The next question, which is newest favorite character, is the same way. Like, I don't usually think of people that way, but I did read The Tainted Cup and the sequel to The Shadow of the Leviathan trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett, and I didn't crush on anyone in that book, but I did really like the relationship between Din and Anna. And so maybe instead of crush and instead of newest favorite character, we can put in here favorite couple or favorite pairing, because Din and Anna aren't a couple, but they're a couple people, but they're more of a pairing. I think also I really enjoyed You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian, and I loved the relationship between the 2 main male characters, Eddie and Mark, and I loved their relationship, so I thought that was really fun. For newest favorite character, I did really like Tukey from The Sentence, but again, I don't know. I just don't think of books that way. I'm not sure why. The next question is book that made you cry, and I've just cried so much this year. I am a person who cries at books. I have cried exponentially more as my career in booktube has gone on than I ever used to. Like, I always cried at books, I always cried at TV shows, I always cried at movies. Sometimes I just cried so much more this year. My feelings are very much like on the surface a lot of the time. I definitely cried during The Color Purple, 100%. I think I cried during the Wayward Children reread. I cried for a lot of books. You Should Be So Lucky. I think I cried a little bit during The Sentence, Born. So I cry a lot. I cried a lot of books. Books that made you happy. Definitely Queer Joy made me happy. Ruby Fruit Jungle. This was another queer classic that I was super happy to get to this year, and that had a lot of queer joy in it too. Both of these books did. So books with queer joy really have made me happy. Getting to books that I've wanted to get to for a long time has made me happy. Revisiting characters like Claire DeWitt has made me happy. Most beautiful book that you have bought or received. That is so hard because there's just so many. I buy so many used books and so many of them are so gorgeous, but like off the top of my head, do beautiful books come to mind? No, of course not. The next question for this tag is, what books do you still need to read? So as always, I still need to read my TBR Spin books. So I have a few months more of TBR Spin. I also haven't done any of the challenges that that I started out doing this year. So originally in the beginning of the year, I was doing the Savage Prompts, I was doing the Read Good Challenge, I was doing the Buzz Coverathon or the Buzzword Cover Challenge, and I was trying to catch up on all those things and do them as I went, like every month, complete some of them, but I really was not able to keep up with just keeping track of that. Like, I'm sure I've read for those things, but I haven't kept track of it. So what I'm going to do instead is at the end of the year or towards the end of the year, I'll go through all these challenges and see what I've read and what I haven't read, and then try to fill in the rest. I do that every year for the Buzzword Reading Challenge, like the original Buzzword Reading Challenge. I never think about it all year, and then at the end of the year I do one vlog where I read anything that I need to fulfill that one. But that wasn't my plan for all these challenges, but now it will be. So at the end of the year or towards the end of the year, you can see a video with the Buzzword Reading Challenge, the Buzzword Cover Challenge, probably the Savage Prompts. I'll probably do those 3 reading challenges in one vlog. The last question for the mid-year reading tag is to shout out your favorite creators. I've been really bad about watching, actually. I've only been watching like my most favorite big creators recently, just because I haven't had a ton of time to watch, and I haven't had a lot of brain power to devote to watching some of my favorite smaller channels. So my favorite bigger channels like Books and Lala, like Meg with Books, like Riley Marie, like Allie Do I Read, are easy for me because I just watch them. I don't usually comment unless I'm like really moved to. Olivia Reads a Latte is another one. Like, I will comment sometimes, but only if I'm moved to comment. Whereas some of the smaller creators that I absolutely love and that are my favorite go-to creators, I really want to be able to sit down, watch their video, comment on their videos. And then there's some people who kind of fall in between, like Brian from Bookish and Ollie from Criminali. They're bigger channels now, and although I consider them like favorites and contemporaries, they're not people that I feel like I have to. They have enough subscribers. I don't have to be the one who comments on their things. But people like Jennifer Loves Books, I love her content, I love watching her videos, I feel like I need to comment on them. I've been watching, but I need to go back and I need to like fully watch. So other smaller channels, other smaller creators are Bookworm Adventure Girl. I really like to watch their channel. Erin Facer, I do pop on and watch a lot of Erin Facer's like tabs and stuff, and I get a lot of good ideas for, not tabs, tags, and I get a lot of good ideas for tags from Erin because he does a lot of cool videos. Savage Reads, not Simon Savage, but the other Savage Reads is a great channel. I mean, I love Simon Savage as well, but that's one of those ones that I don't feel the need to comment on. Sterling Reads, I love to watch her videos. I love that Summer's back making some videos pretty consistently. I need to catch up on those. Nerdy Nat Reads is another one. She is very, very consistent, which I love because there's always something to watch from her, but I need to catch up on her videos. And then recently I've seen a couple of people who haven't been putting very many videos out, put them out, like Spencer's Library, which is a older channel that I really love. They're a pretty big channel, but they're not very consistent with putting things out. So I'm glad to see that. Leanna Reads just put a video out for the first time in a long time, so I was super happy to see that. And the list could go on and on and on. I have like thousands of booktube channels that I watch and thousands of channels that I watch in general. Katie Marie is another one who wasn't putting out videos and she's been putting them back out. She's also, well, she's a medium-sized channel. I mean, she's a small channel in the grand scheme of things. She's a medium-sized channel to me, but I think she has like a big following, and I'm glad to see her putting out videos again. Freshly Read Books is another like medium channel that I love to watch her content, and I watch pretty consistently. Stephanie Bookish is one of my all-time favorite creators. So yeah, just so many creators, a lot of which I have to catch up on, and some of which I watch because I can turn my brain off when I'm watching them. That is the mid-year book tag. This is one of those videos that you do not need to be tagged in, but consider yourself tagged if you feel like you need the extra push, and if you feel like it's too late to do this tag, it's not too late. Do it whenever. Do it whenever you want. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Let me know one answer to one question. I would say your best book of the first 6 months of the year. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!